Evolutionary.org, episode 623 is coming your way. Today we're going to talk about the life and death of Hulk Hogan. We're going to talk about his cycle. We're going to talk about WWE. So this is a really good episode for those of you who are interested in in hearing about this stuff. We're going to go over his background, his wrestling career. We're going to kind of speculate on the steroid use, stuff he said about steroids, all the controversies, the positives, the negatives about him. And we're also going to talk about some forum comments that those of you out there have made on the forum. So first, remind everyone we are on Apple, we are on Spotify. Make sure you're liking, subbing, subscribing, telling your friends and family. We want to make sure that we get the algorithms picking up our podcast. So let's get right into it, Mobster. So Hulk Hogan, he was a cultural force for his wrestling prowess, and he was an icon during his peak. He was the good guy in wrestling. I can remember growing up, I started to watch wrestling probably mid to late 80s. And really, at the time, wrestling didn't hit its true peak, I think, until the mid to late 90s. And that's when I can remember in high school and in college. I can remember the WWF at the time, it was called World Wrestling Federation. Then they had to change the name to World Wrestling Entertainment. It actually went public in the early 2000s, where you could buy the stock. And I remember in college, a lot of the guys in college were like all excited about it. Like, yeah, I want to buy, wrestling stock. It really peaked. It's not so much today. It kind of fell off. A big reason for that is competition. They've got a lot of competition from other sports like the MMA and all this TikTok stuff and social media. And I don't think they were able to kind of keep up with things. But still, it is, it still brings a lot. Like when they have different wrestling and stuff, a lot of people do still go up with it. He was born, his name was Terry Eugene Bollea, I believe, or Bollea, Mobster. Do you know how to
I think it's Bolia, yeah, because I've
Bollea?
seen
Yeah.
other people say it as well. Yeah.
And he was born in Augusta, Georgia, 1953. He grew up in Tampa, Florida. As a kid, he was into baseball and wanted to go pro. He discovered wrestling. He became obsessed with it. One of his icons was superstar Billy Graham. And this was a guy before my time. He was more your time, officer, more in the 70s. So I don't really remember who Billy Graham is. But Terry, Hulk Hogan, Terry, he lifted weights. He started building a body that looked like a comic book hero. He obviously has the genetics. He was also into music. He played bass, guitar in local bands, and then he says he was stepping into the squared circle, and that's what the article references. So physically, he's billed at 6'7" tall, over 300 pounds in his prime. I know they obviously, they make a lot of those numbers. Some of these guys are like 5'4", 5'5", and then they'll say, "Oh, he's 6 foot
Absolutely.
tall." So
Yeah, yeah.
it's big on that. They can just say whatever. I mean, wrestling is fake. So they can make up numbers. Obviously, they want to make the guys bigger than they actually are. Chest was massive. His arms were even more iconic. When he was up there in the ring, he's a big guy. He claimed 24-inch biceps and shirts that never fit him right. He had that beach blonde hair mobster, that long beach blonde hair, just completely played the role as the typical American. He had the mustache. He had the deep tan. Um, he was modeled after 70s bodybuilders, especially Billy Graham. And look, the mustache and bandana combo became synonymous with Hulkamania is what it was called. So he started to train under a guy named Hiro Matsuda, and it was brutal. Matsuda actually broke his leg to see if he had what it took, and then Hogan came back after healing and proved his dedication. So uh, wrestled in Southern promotions and overseas in Japan. He got noticed by Vince McMahon Sr. in the WWF. It started to rise. He had stints in the AWA and New Japan as well. His big break came when he appeared in Rocky 3 as Thunderlips. So that made him a crossover star. So he started getting into movies And in '84, he returned to the WWF and won the heavyweight title. And then Hulkamania was born. And this was around the time, I started to get into wrestling, and he was a couple years into it. So he became a household name mobster. He headlined WrestleMania. He was on cereal boxes. He was in cartoons, on toy stores. They were little figurines. He starred in movies like Suburban Commando and Mr. Nanny, just these dumb fucking movies that people would take their kids to see. He had catchphrases that everyone knew. Kids dressed like him. You had Halloween. Kids would dress like him for Halloween. Adults would watch him on talk shows. He was more than a wrestler. He was the big guy. He was the Rock of that area, a walking brand. They had Hulk Hogan rock and wrestling cartoon. He released a music album. He did it all. And the article references so many different things that he did, Mobster. And it wasn't the money he made from wrestling. We talked about this on the pre-show with Mobster. It wasn't the money he made from wrestling. It was the money he made from all these endorsements. I mean, the cereal boxes, the figurines, the shows he was doing, the movies, going into a movie. Here's $5 grand, here's $10 grand. Will you do a cameo in this movie? That's how he made a lot of money during the 80s. It wasn't from actually going and stay on in wrestling. And then appearing on all the shows. There was a video in the link, Arsenio Hall show. Arsenio Hall was huge around the late 80s, early 90s. He was huge. He was a show that everybody watched. And he would go on these types of shows also, and that would even build his brand. So it was, those were the days. A lot of people really liked that era of wrestling, and he was a big reason why.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I'm familiar with as you just said, the Thunder Lips character. To some far lesser degree, we used to have Saturday afternoon wrestling. It was part of the sports program that we had here in the UK. We obviously started to see American comedies, sitcoms, movies, etc., coming over here. Muscle became fashionable in its way, Steve, with the Rocky movies, with Rambo, with Commando, and so on and so forth. Plastic dolls, kids dolls, the whole stuff that came off the back of that, and especially the 90s and 2000s. I'm thinking of various action figure type dolls, even the typical Action Man and GI Joe started to get a six pack and biceps. So if you kind of resembled these action heroes, these cartoonish figures, I'm trying to think of a couple of obvious brands where you look like that, and you played arguably what was really a kind of cartoon character. You understood that. I think just as a sort of a perspective for people, and this is going to probably tie into the controversy later on, Steve. People don't understand just how fucking hard professional wrestling is. What do I mean by that? You heard about the whole breaking his leg to see if he had quote if he had it, if he had the balls to do this stuff. Many professional wrestlers, all different federations, have talked about, and this is where his career would have come from. You are on the road 40 something weeks a year, which means essentially the people you're fighting are with you on a bus, traveling from venue to venue. Back in the day, he would have promoted, same as Rock back in the day, local venues, local radio, if you were lucky, local TV channels. Again, if you were lucky, this was not national. You are paid in accordance to the draw, meaning if you are a name, you got more money. If you're not a name, you got less money. The Rocks talked about stuff where they would drag in mattresses from the back of motels when he was trying to make his name playing football, American style football, Canadian rules football, whatever the fuck it was back in the day that he was doing, and just getting the cleanest of the dirty mattresses, and just being able, they weren't on the big contracts. This same thing applies to these guys. You are going to stay in a shitty motel to trying to save money so you can send money home, and you haven't made your name yet. And making your name, becoming the Hulk, takes a long fucking time. So it is sweaty. It's literally every weekend for 40 weeks, typically something during the week as well. It is, regardless of how scripted it is very big, muscular people throwing each other around the ring, on the mat doing stuff, and it is very, very easy to get physically hurt. Whether it's an elbow, it's a knee, got to strap that bitch up. You got to take the painkillers. There was actually more of an issue back in the day, Steve, and we're going to talk about story controversies as well, with the guys taking pain medication to deal with the sheer discomfort of doing the things that were scripted or otherwise every goddamn time they wrestled. You're not eating the best food. So to make your name, to get to the peak, to become the icon that I would argue that he was very tough. And I'm not just saying this for him. I'm talking about all of the wrestlers, every single person on the team, the worst one, the lowest paid to the most expensively paid. It's going to be physically hard and physically difficult. So to get to the top is a long journey. To stay at the top, I would argue, and this is where part of the controversy comes in, is probably arguably harder because you now still doing that physical stuff. Maybe you're getting a chance to do something with the script. Maybe you're getting a chance to describe how the fight's going to go, but you're still a 300 plus pound man being thrown around by someone else physically similar to yourself. You've got to put on a show. You've got to entertain. To do that and then entertain 60,000 people, to able, as The Rock's done in the past, one of the things that The Rock says that helped him was the promos. He was able to put together the promos. And the Hulk, I would argue, was good at that, being able to give it the large in character, on the microphone, in front of the TV camera, while you're physically aching, probably training at the same time. So he's trying to maintain muscle mass, eating shitty hotel food, traveling from venue to venue, and kind of getting what makes you famous, understanding what makes you iconic, understanding that the better you sell the fight, the more people come, the more bums on seats, the more you get paid. And that it is brutal. It might be scripted, but it's brutal. And I just mean the whole process. I don't know that I would want to do what these guys were doing back in the day, Steve. 40 weeks of you're not seeing your family for what's that, 4/5 of the year. You are literally out all over the country. You're lucky if you're flying in. A lot of the time you're driving to these things. It's incredibly, incredibly difficult. So the background, the history, what makes you a very famous, iconic wrestler, and iconic in the American psyche, and to a lesser degree in the world psyche, up there, not quite perhaps with Muhammad Ali or Michael Jackson, but very, very close to that kind of level where you could take a picture of this person into an African village or to the Australian outback, and the person, an Aborigine or an African villager, might well know who the fuck you are. And that's without a TV. They've seen some kind of reference to you, and they might even do the flexing of kissing the pythons or the most muscular thing. And you go, hang on, how the fuck does this person know? Because that's how iconic you've become. So I would argue that Hulk Hogan was right up there. So there has to be. I'm going to touch upon the positive and negative as Steve is through the show. There are controversies. There is steroid issues, and I'm going to touch upon that. I don't think it's much of a controversy as it actually was, and I'll say why. But yeah, understanding how difficult it was to become the icon and how arguably perhaps desperate he might have been to hang on to it helps a little bit in understanding some of the positives and especially some of the negatives that we'll talk about later on. So
Yeah, and
yes, Steve.
in wrestling, I used to know a lot of wrestlers. I actually went to school with the daughter of a wrestler. I don't even remember the guy's name, but he was definitely a wrestler, and um, she'd talk about, her dad, always being out of town. And as Mobster said, it takes a toll on your family. This is why a lot of wrestlers go divorced. This is why a lot of pilots go divorced. This is why any job, military, they go divorced. A lot of jobs where you're having to travel a lot, you're having to be away from your spouse, you're having to be away from your family. It takes a toll on the family. And also, having to pick up and throw people, the training that they do. Um, if you get injured in training and you got a match in 2 or 3 days from now, guess what? You're scheduled for that match. You're going. You're still gonna go. You're not gonna cancel it. If you cancel it, they will blackball you out. So that's one of the things that you have to do in these types of things is be punctual and be responsible enough to show up. And if you're injured, tough shit. Take a painkiller, inject yourself, do whatever you got to do. You broke your fucking leg, tough shit. You're going. You're going to be in it. You're not going to cancel the match. People already paid money to go see you. Okay? So you're not going to be able to get out of it. So a lot of times these wrestlers, they wrestle with these severe injuries, torn ACLs, torn ligaments, bad injuries, and they still have to wrestle through it and they get themselves through it and they cause more damage when they do that. It's a very brutal sport. There's a lot of controversy alone, Mobster, when we're just talking about these organizations and what they put their people through. And for every Hulk Hogan or every The Rock or every, you know, Andre the Giant, which is who are wildly successful and make millions and millions of dollars, as Hulk Hogan did. And Hulk Hogan, we talked about on the pre-show, he made millions and millions and millions of dollars, not from wrestling, but from his endorsements. So for every Hulk Hogan, there's 100 or 1,000, maybe probably about 10,000 guys who basically ruin their health forever and are crippled after wrestling and broke. So there's you can take a controversy about that alone, about how brutal wrestling is and the way they chew you up and spit you out. And even with someone like Hulk Hogan, who did make a lot of money, he was able to use that. He still got chewed up and spit out. Because if you see him, he died only at 71 years old, which is not an old age for an American. Most American men live to about 77, 78. That's the average age of American men. Women live to about 80, 81. So he did not live his full life, but you could tell his last couple years, he was a shell of himself. You could tell that he had mental illness. You could tell that he had physical illness. And he had
Yeah,
a multitude of health issues. So
yeah.
wrestling
Let me
absolutely,
just
even with the
list
best
this.
doctors, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just list it. This is in the article, guys. 25 surgeries, knees replaced, spine was fused, shoulder operations, hip replacements, and multiple back procedures. By 2020, I believe this was actually part of the reality show, Walking with an Aid, appeared often with a cane or brace, said to have no feeling in his legs after one surgery. Doctors warned him not to wrestle again. Kept doing appearances, painkillers, quite common. Rehab, physical therapy became routine. Hogan said the wear and tear from wrestling and steroids left his body broken. And obviously, it's a cumulative effect. And I think there's almost and I'm going to touch upon this when I'm talking about the controversy again, almost a need to be out there in the spotlight, like a rock star, like a film star, regardless of how physically broken you are. 100% the background of the business that Steve just described, needing to put bread on the table when you start and being able to break that sort of process. I'm reminded of the boxer movie, Steve, where the wrestler movie with Mickey Haggerty, Mickey Rourke, and they had real wrestlers sitting outside the ring doing the retired, sitting there with walkers, sitting there with sticks, signing photographs, hoping that people would come over and buy something from them because they couldn't do anything else, and this is the only way that they were making money. And even though he was iconic, and even though he did make money, I suspect there was an element of being so used to that process, so used to that lifestyle, so used to that sort of thought process, the psyche, that regardless of how physically battered you are, I've seen him in person at Body Power. I believe he's been to the Arnold and Olympia. He's done promos for the beer in Walmart and other things like this, dressing up in that kind of familiar outfit. He didn't need to do any of those things, arguably, but he was still doing it. I think it was almost, and I don't just apply this to the Hulk, I think there's almost a can't think to do anything else kind of thing when you've been doing this for 40 years and you've come from arguably a poor background. You're almost on a treadmill in terms of wanting to think like that. And arguably, this ties into some of the controversies here, Steve, in terms of how he's made money, how he's held on to making money. And that's just in the wrestling side. I watched a video pre-show, we've talked about it briefly with Steve saying some of the wrestlers, there was an outcry when he died. People thought it was going to be an outpouring of grief, but it's been rather more negative than expected. And a lot of that has actually come from the wrestling community, essentially saying that he told multiple stories which weren't true. He would put himself forward to and push other wrestlers back, even when he'd said he would not. Out and out lied to make sure that he stayed in front, and so on and so forth, more than probably anybody else, with one or two exceptions I can think of, but they're not part of the show today. Understanding that he would say what needed to be said so that he was number one, and putting other people back or down. That's not to say that he did it all the time, but these are a lot of top name wrestlers. The Undertaker, I'm thinking of specifically here, Steve, where things were agreed, and then Hulk conveniently forgot that they'd have been agreed on, so long as it benefited the Hulk. So again, I think there's a almost. I have a certain degree of sympathy, only so far as I would not want to be on the receiving end of it, but I kind of almost understand this person was desperately hanging on by their fingernails to stay relevant, to stay iconic, to hold on to those when you really shouldn't need the money, the last $100, $1,000 extra bit of cash that you can earn from doing these things, where arguably you're actually kind of pushing other people back and damaging the career, and ultimately damaging your own reputation, because he should have been a much more iconic, much more revered person than he ended up being. I will touch on this, and this is just a human aspect. And we touched on this in a recent show that Steve and I recorded, I think late last week, early this week, where we said, I think I used the phrase, Steve, icons having feet of clay. Because you're presented in a certain way on the TV, on the microphone, in the ring, in movies, at the chat shows and so on and so forth, you're allowed to come across in a certain particular way. It's almost a self-created image, but part of it is obviously the scripted image and so on and so forth. It's difficult for people to imagine that you might be a wanker, that you might be selfish, that you might be greedy. They forget the stress and aggravation of the road to becoming famous, the work. I mean, literally, Steve, imagine day one of your career, and I know what Steve does for a living, they break your fucking legs, Steve, to see if you're going to be good at your job. Day one. Day fucking one. That is a hell of a start. And I think that every single day after that is arguably either a gift or a grind. And then to do that shit and have that kind of psyche for 40 fucking years, it might, and he's not the only person this has probably happened to, it might kind of explain a little bit of why he was that selfish, that greedy, that sort of thing. And that's the aspect of the controversy, Steve. The money, let me just touch on one thing in regards to money. I mean, there was some argument being worth, at his peak of his career, Steve, 30 million US dollars, making money, as we said before, from wrestling, movies, and endorsements. Arguably, and this applies to bodybuilding, which is a majority of our shows, and to strongman, which is a smaller degree. There is money to be made outside of the actual activity. Arguably, Steve, in some ways, more money. More money. If you create a plastic doll of me that kids are going to collect, I guarantee you I make more money from that figure than I do from wrestling on a Saturday night for 40 weeks in a year. I guarantee it, because it's a one-time deal. One of the things was a sex tape that had been made without his consent and then put out there. This was in 2016. The court awarded $140 million in damages, obviously agreeing that he'd been misrepresented, he hadn't been given permission, and so on and so forth. In reality, they come to an agreement, which was somewhere between $30 and $31 million. That arguably revived his finances, with other bits and pieces after that, and specifically around the time of the reality show and other things that he was doing at that particular time. 2025 estimates put his net worth around $25 million, with stuff like Hulk Hogan's Beat Shop and appearing, as I said earlier on, same as the other wrestlers at conventions. And as I said, this is when I've seen him at Body Power and other things. And you know, he was up there with the Mr. Olympias and the top bodybuilders in terms of that's fucking Hulk Hogan, and people queuing up for 4 hours to have a picture for 30 seconds, Stephen, Polaroid and get the signature on something. So definitely, yeah. And I've seen pro bodybuilders, just to finish on that particular thought. I've mentioned this, I think, in another article that we discussed recently, and we've done a show on this already. And it was a side thing on Ronnie Coleman appearing. I believe he'd done some sort of seminar which was prearranged. This is late on a Saturday at Body Power some years ago when I was being paid to attend myself, working on the stand opposite. And Ronnie came in 2 hours before the doors were due to close and probably earned roughly $15,000. I literally saw cash being put into a Ziploc bag, a document type bag. It was just being stuffed in, and probably earned something like $15,000 in those 2 hours. So, that's way more than you're going to get paid for a Saturday night at the early part of your career. And you understand if you do this up the whole weekend, that's $30,000. If you do it multiple weekends, you're not wrestling, you're not dieted down to 0% body fat. You're not at the extreme oomph of your career in terms of the pain and physicality from bodybuilding, weightlifting, whatever. This is literally what you've done already, and you can probably earn as much in a month as you might have earned in the biggest competition that you've dieted for 6 months for example, or the contest prep for 16 weeks, and you've gone away and earned some of that money as often as not tax free. Depends on whether they were declaring it or not. In a matter of hours over a few weekends. So yeah, honestly, guys, it's again, what else is he going to do? Is he going to sing or whatever else? So yeah, what else do you think about the money before we talk about the forum comments?
Yeah, and The Rock was smart. Let me just leave it at this. The Rock was smart getting out of wrestling as soon as he became a big hit. He milked that. He milked that. Then he went into film. So, because that's called being smart and that's called preserving your body. Just like the reason Barry Sanders retired from the NFL so early because he wanted to preserve his mind and his body. So doing what The Rock did was very, very smart and not pounding his body in the dirt. Let's get into the steroid use. Now, Hogan admitted to using steroids, and I'll bring you in shortly, Mobster, after I go over this. During his career, it was investigated how rampant steroids were in wrestling. Hogan testified in 1994 that he'd been using steroids for the past 20 years, defending himself because he said they were legal when he used them. He also made, there was also talk, hey, everyone else was using them, so, why shouldn't I have used them? So fans didn't like that. They turned on him. He wanted, when you have an image of the squeaky clean, beach blonde American, and all this stuff, and then people find out that you're not the squeaky clean person, and we're going to get into that shortly, even with this stuff with his family. People will turn on you. And a lot of people felt like steroids were considered cheating at the time. And still to this day, Mobster, whenever you hear of an NFL athlete getting busted for steroids, people will say the same thing. Oh, they're cheaters, blah, 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 blah. And people don't like that at all. That's one thing Americans don't like is cheaters. If they perceive you as a cheater. So, and at the end of the day, his steroid controversy did lead to changes in the WWE when it came to how the sport took care of their athletes. But in reality, it was all for show. In reality, little was done. Like, in other words, so they started to test their athletes for steroids. Well, the testing that they do is a big joke because you get such a huge amount of time between your testing where it's easy to, it's like in the NFL, they test for pot. It's like once a year they test for pot and they tell you what date they're going to test you for pot. So as long as you don't smoke pot however long ahead of that day, you're going to pass the test. Before it was they would randomly test you for pot, so you wouldn't be able to smoke. So basically in the NFL, you can smoke pot year round as long as you don't smoke it leading up to that specific test they're going to give you. So it's sort of like that. So, look, at the end of the day, we could speculate on what type of steroids he could have used, and it's the ones that were available at the time. And I think, Mobster, I think you'll agree with me that when he first started using steroids in the 70s, it was Deca and Dynabol. Those were the two that he would have been all over at that time. Then later on, as you got into late 80s and early 90s, testosterone, HGH, and Anavar were the big ones, especially late 80s, early 90s with the Anavar. And then the wrestlers of today, I believe, would be on heavy doses of testosterone, HGH, Trenbolone, Superdrol, and Anadrol. Those are the big ones. So if he had access to those back in the 70s, or if Arnold had access to any of those in the 70s, could you imagine the physiques that these guys would have had? So definitely we've had an evolution in what kind of steroids the wrestlers are using. Mobster, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. There's two kind of steroid controversies, Steve. The first one that Steve's touched upon It was the 1994 when they were essentially taken to court. And the irony, as Steve said, that they actually dropped the steroid testing around 1996 because of the cost. I suspect the testing was done in the off season, those 12 weeks of the year when they weren't wrestling. I also suspect there was an element of if your name, if you was a name, if you was iconic, you might not get tested. But if you've pissed the boss off, if you are on your way down, Kelsey Priest, you got tested. Here's the thing, right? And the controversy comes from arguably the image. You have to remember at this time he was actually telling kids to say your prayers and take your vitamins. They'd gone from local TV, local radio to national. And I think the argument for the legal side, regardless of the legal aspect or status of using steroids, was if you're going to be representing something iconic to kids, to adults on national TV, seen by 30, 40, 50 million people over a weekend on television, on cable, or whatever. We want you to be tested for drugs. We want you to represent something to children and teenagers that might be trying, kids were running around doing WWE style wrestling in their gardens, Steve, with trampolines and stuff. And even that still takes place now. But the reality is stupid. And I say this in the nicest possible way. Again, you are doing something physical that requires you to look like a Superman, a cartoonish, muscular physique from a fucking bus between venues, the shitty venues with shitty training facilities and crappy changing rooms and rubbish venues sometimes, and not knowing if you're going to get paid $500, and yet you must look muscular. You must be able to wrap yourself up, even put makeup on. You've got to be able to present yourself, like I said, on the radio and on the television to promote the event. This is local stuff, never mind the national stuff. How the fuck? And let's use this as an top pro bodybuilder, Steve. I've talked about not being able to pump up backstage because there's no weights. Having to bring their own food with them on an airplane because they don't know the quality of the food when they get there. And this is in order to present a Mr. Olympia level physique. Your own tan. I just spoke to a bikini competitor today, Steve. If she brought the outfit for cash, it would be over $1,000. She actually rents it, and it's still $200 to rent the outfit she'll be wearing to a show. Now, you're a top professional wrestler. You're iconic. You're on TV. Of course you're fucking taking steroids, Steve, just to maintain, just to try and get through. The growth hormone is just to fix your issues with your injuries. I said the worst thing in my mind, which was never really that controversial, but it should have been and was kind of controversial a little bit, was the use of the painkillers. The new Bane that was a bodybuilding issue at the same time in the late 80s and 90s was way more just to be able to wrestle, like strapping that injury up, like Steve said. Got a broke, let's strap you the fuck up, that we won't grab your leg. I'm going to still throw you around the ring. You're going to be in pain. Ice it. Take some painkillers. Let's get this shit done. So the idea that you wasn't using steroids, how naive is the crowd that they got a 300-pound muscular man that looks good every fucking Saturday night when he's just driven in on the bus, stayed at a shitty motel, and then gets to the venue and then wrestles for 3 hours, does the promote and all the other shit, and barely able to get a workout. And the guys who talked about workouts, they were lucky sometimes to get 2 workouts a week in, Steve, in between shows and wherever. And again, this would be a shitty gym because it's on the tour. It's wherever the fuck you're going. It's not always going to be good. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Of course you're taking steroids just to maintain your muscular physique and look like a fucking superhero. The later one was the Chris Benoit, the murder / suicide, killing his wife, killing the kids. And of course, the stupidity, even from that controversy, because you and I understand this, was that the focus at the time by the media, and it wasn't just Chris Benoit, it was other aspects of different, even bodybuilders that had been involved, where they were taking recreational drugs, by getting high as fuck, taking painkillers to deal with issues, and yet the media focused on the idea that it was the steroids that had made them mad, and that's the reason why they'd murdered this person and that person. So that was the later 2007 one, Steve. And again, it focused a lot on wrestling and what the wrestlers were doing. The reality is that no steroid rage case has ever been proven in court, even when it's been used as a defense, never actually been proven scientifically ever. And it completely ignores the alcohol abuse, people being drunk and do stupid shit, like lots of other people have done, high as fuck on coke, high on painkillers, and so on and so forth. So yeah, let's move on to the later controversies, Steve, because yeah,
Yeah.
this is
So
more recent.
so so Hogan married Linda Claridge. They had two children who were featured in his reality TV show and showed a softer side of Hogan. And today there's reality TV shows all over the place. Back then it was I think it was more of a big deal. It was very rare because you had mostly sitcoms that people were into. So one of the controversies with that was his son was involved in a severe car crash, which left his friend with brain damage, which led to lawsuits. Hogan also divorced his wife, and there were allegations of cheating and abuse. And Hogan lost a big amount of money, settle it all. His daughter has also come out and said that there was rampant abuse, both physically and emotionally, among Hogan. He's also been called a racist, a liar, a fraudster by many based on some of his behaviors over time. He was also booed at one of his last WWE appearances. So there's been a lot of controversies with him. Mobster, you want to touch on that before we get to the forum comments?
Again, Steve, I mean, I'm reminded of the feet of clay comment. Yeah, look, absolutely certain things took fucking place. Divorces being nasty, how novel, how new. I'm taking the piss here, obviously. You've got tens of millions of dollars. The lawyers are kicking ass. It's costing you a great deal of money. What with that later court case I mentioned where you got 30 million, 31 million, that was a court case in and of itself for her to get her share of this post divorce. Even the falling out with your daughter, you slagged off, as we say here in the UK, your daughter's potential boyfriend, your daughter gets upset. Naturally, what a fucking surprise. But then you got the media, this sitting down. Ultimately, you and I shouldn't have this, Steve. It's a private conversation. If I have an argument with my girlfriend, it's not on the fucking news. It's not on social media. It's not being discussed. It's just between me and her, and we say that shit and we move on. And then, but this is different. So the public stuff is always going to be horrible. The racist thing is hard to argue against. I'm just reminded perhaps of my own upbringing and something that he used as an excuse. Well, my late father, bless him, trying his absolute best not to be a racist, invites a black friend of ours over for Christmas because he would have been on his own and made the rather puerile statement, which we were like, fortunately, it was laughed off. And he said something stupid like, to my buddy Richard, well, Richard, it's like you're not even black. Like, he tried his best not to be racist, but he did. And it's very much a generational thing. But having that recorded, having your shit put out there into the world, it's always going to be when again you've spent your whole fucking life putting your image across. Eat your vitamins, say your prayers, go to bed early, kids. Listen to your mum and dad. I'm playing the baby face, the nice guy in wrestling for decades, and then people find out that you're a prick. It's never gonna be good. And worse, this a lot of the stuff like the car crash was part of that show, Steve. So someone else just died recently, Ozzy Osbourne, and came across as a affable, bouncing around the house, suffering because of the shit he'd done to himself with abusing alcohol, but otherwise a nice guy versus someone who could arguably be exactly the same, but came across on occasion as a dickhead and really, really put his foot in his mouth. And perhaps more would be maybe arguably more self-aware that you can't say stupid shit and not have people think you're a fucking moron. And look how much forgiveness he was given over the length of his career from the wrestlers, from the community, from other
Yeah.
stupid things. But ultimately, at
I
the
think
end,
I think a big reason for
yeah,
that though is because they wanted to make money off of him. Because we see this in any sport. Look at the NFL, for example. If a player does something and he's a really, really good player, they brush it off as nothing. I mean, we've had some players commit rapes, but they still completed their career like nothing happened. But another player might be caught speeding and he's cut the next day because he's just not that good. You see, so the better you are, the more money you can generate for your bosses, the more forgiveness is given to you. So we see that all the time in sports. But look, at the end of the day, when it comes to a celebrity or singer, dancer, sports icon, it's the company you keep. It's the company you keep. That judges your character. So think about it. Think of what I'm saying. Those of you out there, who are the people you're hanging out with? Are they good people or are they scumbags? And that's very, very important. I had a childhood friend growing up who grew up in an abusive household, and he turned out to be pretty fucked up, mobster, very fucked up in the head. And the older I got, the more I realized this guy was bad news. I should stay away from this guy. And the final straw for me was the last time I met up with him, and he said some very, 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 very bad things, and I was like, you know what? I'm done with this guy. I don't even want to see him again. I don't want to talk to him again.
Yeah,
So at the end of the
yeah,
day, it's the company you keep. At the end of the day, just the way he talked about women, just the way
yes,
he talked about his marriage, the way he went to Vegas while married, got lap dances by strippers, got blowjobs by strippers. Like he was telling me all these stories, and I'm like, dude, that's the kind of person you are. That's you invited me to
yeah,
your
yeah,
wedding as the best
yeah,
man,
yeah.
and I had to sit there and hug your wife and congratulate her, and that's the way you treat your wife, and she's a great
I,
girl. That's the
I,
way you treat your wife. This is not the
you know
person
how I
I want to
look, Steve.
associate with.
Steve's seen me in person on my face when we've done these videos and talked to each other on Zoom or whatever else. I look like a big muscular skinhead. My head is very, very short. And two people have assumed that I'm a racist. One yesterday, Steve, literally made some comment, and as I walked away, I was thinking, fuck, what the fuck do you think I'd be okay with him saying that? That was completely bizarre. And another one who struggles with alcohol, which has to be said, literally showed me his KKK tattoo. And I think I was meant to respond in a certain particular way. And Steve and I have talked about this before on pre-shows. I come from a very, if not in my family, the where I lived and was born and brought up was very multicultural. So I'm completely, that's my background. I'm not racist, but the idea, I mean, obviously saying stupid things the same as everybody else, but the idea that these two people see me in a certain particular way and think that I'd be okay with it, like Steve says, it's disappointing because it's especially with your friends, Steve. So yeah, look, when you've got this idea in your mind how someone's supposed to be, in the case of Hulk, it's very disappointing when you find out they are fucked up, really fucked up. And there's sometimes an element of it. I think this didn't help him at all apologizing because he knew he'd fucked up for knowing that he'd fucked up rather than apologizing for being a prick, for
Yeah.
being a racist, for
I
saying
think I
stupid
think
shit.
though we have to stop. I said this as well in the Lee Priest one we did. You got to stop putting these people on the pedestal. They're humans just like everyone else. They're flawed, and I think the image that he
Yeah,
portrayed during
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
80s, was bullshit, and then compare it to what it is. So, we talk about the controversies. If he put his finger on his daughter sexually, physically, he's a piece of shit. Period. Period. He's a piece of shit. You should do life in prison, no possibility of parole. Never should be able to even touch another fucking child again. Period. So I got zero empathy for this guy at all. And it's pathetic to see all these people. Oh my God, Hulk Hogan's dead. Okay, well, I think his daughter can live, can breathe again, not knowing that this monster is still out there. That's one perspective. The other perspective is, yeah, he changed the way wrestling was, blah blah blah. Good for him. He made, a lot of people money, over the years, and he grew the sport to where it was. So you can look at the positive and you can look at the negative perspective. It just depends on the way you can look at the situation. At the end of the day, we're all going to die one day. In his case, passed away on July 24, 2025 from cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead shortly after at 71 years old. So, Master, let's get into the forum comments. I'm going to read some forum comments and let you respond like we always do on these types of episodes. So, Pigsy says, as a wrestling icon, no one is bigger than Hulk Hogan. Started off as the babyface wrestler. Then, when he joined WCW and formed NWO and turned heel, he made being a heel in the wrestling game cool. which then started the Attitude Era. Hulkmania will always be large in the wrestling world.
Got to agree. I can't argue against that. I mean, the fact that they do this back and forth, baby face heel, back to baby face, and so on and so forth, is the whole scripted part of it. And you're almost acting, you're almost selling. So listen, I would agree 100% with Pigsy in that regard. And I said this at the beginning, and I'll finish at the end of this podcast as well by talking about the iconic aspect because I still think there stands. So yeah, 100% agree with Pigsy.
TG says anyone from 80s and 90s who follows wrestling at some point definitely knows this man. He is an icon for the wrestling world. He is the great of the greats. First time ever watching at maybe 9 years old, I recall Hulk Hogan being the man in the matchup, but could not remember the opponent. Young me thinking wrestling was real and how big and cool they all were. Younger siblings followed his family TV show, always recording episodes. So yeah, I think it was in. I think when I was probably in first or second grade, I was watching wrestling with my dad, and my dad's like laughing at it. He just found it entertaining, just like funny. And he told me, he's like, "Yeah, you know this is fake, right?" And I was like shocked. I was like, "Really? This is fake?" He's like, "Yeah, it's fake. It's all scripted. They all do that." He told me. So in third grade, there was a big at the lunch table. There was a bunch of all of us were sitting. Of course, all the boys used to sit together, all the girls used to sit together, but all the boys were sitting, and there was an argument about wrestling. And several of the guys were like, wrestling is not fake, blah, blah, blah. And one kid was like, yes, it's fake, it's fake. So then they all went to me. I was always the one, everyone went to, even in those days, for a final answer. And they went to me, Steve, is wrestling fake? And I was like, well, I didn't want to break the kid's heart. But I finally went to him and I said, I'm like, yeah, it's fake. They're like, what? And it completely changed. They never discussed wrestling again the rest of the year. I think it really upset a lot of the kids. It's kind of like Santa Claus. It's like being told Santa Claus isn't real for the first time. It just
There's no
upsets
two
you.
fairy kids.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, enjoy it for the
Yeah.
entertainment. Don't enjoy it
Yes.
because it's real.
Yes.
But the injuries they're getting are real,
Real.
and
Yeah.
the beating that they're taking is real
Yeah.
as well.
Very athletic. Look, I mean, absolutely, Steve. Here in the UK, Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy were iconic, and I regularly watched them. You don't understand in reality. They probably arrived to the venue in the same fucking car. They're sharing the same changing room. They're probably going for a beer at the hotel afterwards. But in the ring, you think these people genuinely hate each other. And one of them's got his giant belly, and he must have weighed 22, 23 stone, so 300 pounds. The other guy was even taller. The giant haystacks carried 400 pounds, and he wore this thing. It looked like a fucking bear skin or something. And they were literally belly bumping, and the ring was shaking and all of it. Yeah, that was fucking entertaining as fuck. It's only towards the end, from my teenagers into my late teens, early 20s, you go, yeah, they're probably sharing a hotel room to save money. But yeah, entertainment. Look, no difference what going to the circus and watching a juggler. The whole thing with a trapeze act, Steve, that they might fall, even though they've practiced this move a million times. The whole thing is for you to be entertained, for you enjoy the show, the circus, and so on. Yes, it's physical. Yes, they're athletic. Yes, it's a very hard living to make, but it wasn't real. Real wrestling, Olympic wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, Cumberland wrestling, and other stuff, sumo to a lesser degree, is arguably far more athletic. But that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking
Yeah.
at people that look like cartoon characters throwing each other around the ring, and you're supposed to enjoy the spectacle.
All right, so the next one is Todd the Lyman. He says, I never got into wrestling. It always seemed totally silly to me. Hulk seemed like a cool dude though. Pretty ridiculous how the public reacted to him coming clean about the steroids. I guess my parents told me about the stuff when I was really young, so I wasn't so sheltered about it. Mobster, quick response.
Yeah, this is a hard-working guy who's probably had a really good upbringing. I've seen some of his other comments, and so yeah, look, if you're not a fan per se or whatever, then you see it for what it is. Other people that are fans, you don't want your illusions shattered. So there's probably an element of that about it, Steve.
Noah Wicks made a large comment. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he said Hogan knew how to make money and how to draw an audience back when he worked in the Southern Territories for wrestling. He was also getting booked with big names in those territories. So when he talks about the Southern Territories, he's talking about the Southern Territories in Australia, right? Mobster?
I probably Georgia, Texas, etc. I think that's what you're talking about. They literally do a circuit around the country back in the day, Steve.
Oh, okay. And then he says that I can't remember the details, but it was something with a trademark or copyright infringement, so WWE have had to pay a fee for that. He's talking about talking about the whole Hulkamania thing, the
Yeah,
Marvel comics, and all that stuff. Overall, wrestling today would not be anywhere near the height it is without people like Hogan paving the way.
absolutely. The WWF was the World Wildlife Fund, and they argued that they'd used the WWF thing before. The wrestling people said there's no fucking comparison. We're not trying to be anything to do with wildlife, but they were told to cease and desist. So they lost that case. But actually, again, wrestling being what it is, they probably made some traction for the wrestling and got attention, and they got more media and more shows on the TV because of the court case. So they're very much, the whole wrestling thing has always been about making what you can out of a bad situation.
All right, so I got, let's see, one, two, three, four, five more comments, Mobster. So let's do a lightning round, just 1 minute on each. Madcap71, he himself is a wrestler, and maybe you can talk maybe an extra minute about this. He says Hulk Hogan. He says, undoubtedly a massive legend and influence to professional wrestling and pop culture, arguably one of the most famous people on the planet in the 90s. And then he talks about Tara Bolia, which is Hulk Hogan's real name, a horrible, racist, liar with questionable morals, disliked by many of his peers and fans alike. In his last WWE appearance earlier this year, he was booed out of the building. So this is actually surprising that they booed him, Mobster, because a lot of people who watch wrestling, it's more of a rural, southern type of thing. So I wouldn't think that they would have an issue with, his racism, but I guess there are good people
I
out there. I
don't care
guess. I don't
what
know.
sports you. I don't care what sports you do, Steve. There are lines beyond which the fans will not allow you to cross. If you're loved, if you make a mistake, if they genuinely think you've made a mistake, you can be forgiven. Come back, say your prayers, do your shit, wrestle again, build your name back up. But if you cross certain particular lines, that's kind of it. Here in the UK, George Best was a footballer. We loved him as a footballer. We cried, if you like, about his alcoholism, and we couldn't understand how this talent could be so wasted just by you constantly drinking liver, liver or kidney fucking donations and all this kind of stuff, and you carry on doing that, and at some point you lose whatever the fuck it is you had with the fans. He was probably so much of an alcoholic, Steve, he didn't care. Maybe this is what's happened here. They just couldn't deal with him crossing the line so fucking far that they cannot see and forgive him and allow him to come back into the fold, so to speak. So yeah,
All right, so in Madcap71, by the way, you can come on the forum and check him out. He's got videos of him wrestling and photos of him wrestling. It's actually really cool. He actually travels to Italy and stuff.
let me touch on this a little bit, Steve.
Okay.
Just for the amateur stuff, you've seen this at school. It's an actual high school thing in America. Not all our listeners are Americans, of course. Proper wrestling of the kind that's done in high school, competitive wrestling, is fucking brutal. Fucking seriously brutal. And especially if you need to make weight. If you are anything but a heavyweight, you have to be in your weight class. Proper wrestling is probably one of the toughest things you can actually physically do. It's fucking really, really hard. I believe I saw a documentary on this years ago, and the making weight thing was huge. The sweatsuits, sitting in saunas, climbing up pegboards, doing crazy fucked up shit just to get into shape, just to be able to compete. And then it's the kudos that you get, the feel good aspect that you get from playing soccer in this country, or American football, or ice hockey, or basketball, just isn't there for wrestling. So the real shit is not as valued as it ought to be. And maybe, arguably, it's a stepping stone into the professional career. Like with the MMA, there are schools you can go to, and those schools, perhaps not breaking their legs, like happened to the Hulk on his first day, but they are fucking tough. And regardless of what we say about the way that professional wrestling is scripted, etc., 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 to get to that level from school, from high school, in college, perhaps representing your college, maybe at the Olympics, then the transfer, as one or two have done, into professional wrestling. It is one, you have earned every fucking dollar that they're going to pay you. And obviously, you're getting nothing to begin with. You're not getting a sponsorship. People are not buying you drinks in a bar unless it's a specific wrestling bar. So it is the top Madcap doing the stuff that he does is to be respected. And again, especially at the level, he's not making Hulk type money. He will be doing 50, 100, $200 for a Saturday night where they're smashing, they're doing the whole barbed wire thing and the table slamming thing, Steve. And it's fucking, it's like being a stunt man and you are literally going to get hit. There are things you can do, but it's very, very difficult, Steve.
All right, so we got four more comments, Mobster. Let's do a lightning round on these ones. So Yuri says, I never really grew up with wrestling here in Australia with the same impact it had on the US culture. So super interesting to read this and the insight for sure. Thoughts on that?
Agree. There's with Aussie rules football's the only thing I can think of. I don't think they have a big wrestling thing over there, Steve.
CEO says, Bros, you speak the truth. I didn't know much about him until recently. Some major allegations from his daughter, not good. Not surprised the company you keep tells you all you need to know about a person. So I kind of saw that earlier. I kind of agree with CEO.
Yeah.
Company you keep, and this is why when you go apply for a job or you go to find a place to live or rent that has an
Mm.
HOA and the board looks over your stuff. They look at your credit history because they want to see what's your credit history. Are you paying your bills on time? Are you responsible? What's your criminal history like? The company you keep is important. Is this person going to bring over guests who are bad news? So this is
Yeah.
kind of true. The company you keep is important, Mobster.
I wasn't aware just how despised he was by some top professional wrestlers, very, very big names. And in the pre show, literally about 20 minutes, half an hour before the pre show started, I was watching some of the interviews, Stephen, and it was
Who
surprising how he came across. So,
who
yeah,
who who,
definitely.
who are you talking about?
Well, the specific one that I remember the name of was The Undertaker, saying that, for example, one of the biggest fights they had, he was meant to drop the Hulk on his head, but
Uh-huh.
there was a whole thing where they hold it a certain way. The head never made contact with the mat. Hulk played it like it had been hurt himself so that he could get what he wanted from it. The Undertaker goes and sees him, said, listen, your head never even touched the ground. What the fuck are you doing? And felt let down by the Hulk's response and how the Hulk played it out. And this is just with the bosses, never mind with the fans and pretending to be injured and whatever the fuck. So he knows he wasn't scripted like it's supposed to be,
Gotcha.
done the way that they agreed, and then the
Yeah.
Hulk fucking lied. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, because if, he can get away with it, in that situation. So it's kind of like in football, it's like that douchebag on the team who does whatever they want. They don't do the correct play. They kind of freelance. They're not listening to the coaches, and then it
exactly. Yeah,
makes the guy next to him look bad because he's not
yes,
doing what
yes,
he's supposed to do.
yes.
So it's kind of selfish. It's basically a
Well,
selfish
they're,
act.
they're,
Yeah.
they're, they're working this stuff in advance, and then you're still being
Yeah.
fucked over. That's the thing. Yeah,
So you're screwing the person you're with. Yeah, I can see his perspective on that. Yeah, that's messed up. Alter says, very nice. You're gonna like this one, Mobster. He says, very nice article for sure. I think me and the Hulk have a lot of similar experiences in life. We,
yeah, yeah.
we both also have troublemaker daughters. I don't blame him one bit for physically and mentally abusing her. Sometimes kids have to be put in their place. When I was growing up, it was okay for parents to beat us, no problem. So let me just comment on this really quick. So I've dated women from the
Yeah,
South,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Hulk Hogan was from the deep South. He was from Georgia. And I've
Yes.
actually been asked on a date, would you hit your kids if they were bad? And I've said, no, I wouldn't. I was hit when I was a kid,
Hmm.
myself, and I don't agree with it. It didn't do me any good. It made me worse by hitting me. But anyway, women actually will ask you this on a date because, who are Southerners, who are from the deep South, because in their culture, it's considered okay to beat on your kids. When I was growing up, Mobster, listen to this one. In
Hmm.
school, in elementary school, the teacher could take a belt or a
Yeah.
stick and hit you. They take your shorts off and hit you
I've had that.
your bare
I've
butt.
had it.
It was
Yeah, I've
legal
had.
at that
Yeah,
time. They banned
yeah,
it
yeah.
at some point in the mid to late 80s. I think they banned it in my state, but in some states they kept that type of punishment allowed, where the teacher was actually allowed to hit you, and it was always the same kids who would get beat, you know. And it wasn't because they were bad kids. I think a lot of it was they had like ADHD or autism or something. And back then, they never like properly diagnosed these poor kids. So it
Mm.
was the kids acting up in class, but they weren't really acting up. It was just the way they were. So it's sad. I'm not laughing at it. It's actually sad that, yeah.
Alter has actually admitted to certain particular things which make me feel, without, I don't want to be unkind to him, he's literally posted up photographs of his daughter's bedroom, which has still got some of the Cabbage Patch dolls in there. He has been disenfranchised with his daughter for some situation he didn't handle very well. He's had shit situations, maybe affects him in terms of relationships. That's perhaps put this uh, sense of view or perspective on some of the things and the way he sees the world. He was actually surprised that I would be okay with certain particular things and tried to sort of persuade him that perhaps, mend some bridges, mate. And I thought you Brits would be like, I said, mate, yeah, sure we are. But at the same time, I'm 60 something years of age. You can't be like a wanker all your life, mate. You got to, if you want your daughter back in your life, if you want to have a relationship with women, you're going to have to mend your ways a little bit and understand that you can't be like this all the time. So look, I mean, yeah, Hulk Hogan as that thing. We are partly products of our upbringing. And I'm just going to finish here, Steve. So we are products of our upbringing. We are products of the career path and how difficult that might have been. But you do not have to be your parents. There's a phrase, I believe, Philip Larkin says, your parents fuck you up, they do, or something like that. We quite often are a reflection. So sometimes the way that our parents are, we literally go in a different direction. Sometimes we have, I've been hit as a child. I've been hit when I was at school with a ruler a couple of times over the back of the hand or whatever else. Fortunately, never ever see it in my pants. I'm probably more okay that from that generation with the idea of being physical, but equally, the two times in my life, once when she was very small and once when she was around 12, that I hit my daughter, I was more upset than she was because I realized the situation had got out of hand. And even then, I would have been physically strong and muscular when she was 12. So I could have really, really fucking hurt her if I'd been that way inclined. And I no, it wasn't. My dad never hit me, for example. My mum did the punishment. So the idea that you're allowed to be a dickhead because of your upbringing is no excuse. That's bullshit. We're supposed to be better than the last generation, and they should be better than the generation before. So again, this is what I said about Hulk earlier on. You're allowed a certain amount of leeway as a hero, as an icon. You're allowed to have feats of clay. You're allowed to be human and fuck up. And people need to remember that. Equally, there's only so much shit that people will put up with. And that's whether it's your racist buddy, whether it's a silly thing from someone saying something they shouldn't say, whether it's being recorded, being a dickhead, whether it's being abusive, because perhaps the abuse was partly because he was going through a shitty divorce with his wife. So he's being verbal with his daughter, and it's nothing to do with the daughter. It's the wife. You're arguing, you're divorcing your wife. You're not divorcing the whole fucking family, and so on and so forth. Look, just to finish the whole thought process and to the end of the show as well. Look, is he an icon as a wrestler? I would argue yes. From start to finish, the whole becoming a wrestler, understanding the nature of the business, trying to stay relevant, trying to keep your name in the frame, should be understood. Wrestling, the kind that he did, is a business, and you make money from businesses, and you keep your own career in the limelight by understanding how it works. But don't fuck over your buddies. You've got to work with these people all the time. Don't do stupid shit that's going to muddy your, really, for a very long time, iconic presentation to the world. If you are seen as a nice guy, if you are really, for the most part, even if you're a bit of a bullshitter, trying to do the right things, trying to be a nice guy, trying to actually realize that perhaps you do represent something special to children, even if it's a bullshit sport on a Saturday night that people kind of love you, don't fuck it up by being a dickhead. But yeah, human beings doing stupid shit. I'm sure I'm going to do stupid shit at some point in the future. I'm sure Steve will. We just don't get our fucking names out there in the
Yeah.
media.
The
So
cat, one of
yeah,
the stray cats did some stupid shit this morning. It climbed one of those palm trees
oh,
with
yeah,
the
but yeah,
sharp
yeah,
edges. And the
yeah.
thing with cats, they can climb, but it's hard to get down. So he ended up like injuring himself on the way, and his paw is like really injured. So I had to take his paw and dip it in like this cortical cream, for a bacterial infection.
I was
So
going to
we
scream like a
see,
bitch.
yeah. So humans do stupid shit all the time.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
don't expect too much out of people. I think that's a big misguided thing. People out there, they expect too much out of people, and people make mistakes all the time. You take your car into the mechanic, they make mistakes all the time. You do your taxes, your accountant make mistakes all the time. So at the end of the day, we're humans, we make mistakes, and at the end of the day, we're all gonna die at some point. So look, I mean, at the end of the day, that's how it is. So last comment, Mobster.
I was always worried, Steve, if I ever won the lottery, every nasty, horrible fucking thing I've ever said or done, mistakenly or otherwise, someone's going to come out of the woodwork to say shit to get their money from the newspaper or the
Well,
TV,
if I won
just
the
so that they
lottery,
can get their hands on it.
I would disappear. That's for sure. I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
disappear. No
yeah,
one would be
yeah,
able to reach me. I'd be on an island
yeah,
somewhere. You're never
yeah,
gonna see
yeah,
me
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Last one. Let's end it on a positive note. Reuters seems like he had a lot of health issues as he got older. Would notice he seemed to slow down a lot as you get older. Things seem to domino effect. 70 years old is young, and it is young. But you could definitely tell that he was slowing down both mentally and
Yes,
physically.
yes,
And it seemed like he was like a deer in the headlights his last couple of years. So you can always tell when someone is on the last legs of their life.
yes,
One of the best ways you can tell is just the changes in personality, not wanting to go out, and also losing weight. When you see people lose weight rapidly, it means health problems. And it's the same thing with cats. Like when your cat, my cat, last cat I had that passed away, Mobster knows this. It stopped eating for like 10 days. So it was obviously old, and it
yeah,
was obviously his kidneys were shutting down and all this other stuff.
yeah.
So that's a great way to know, and that's definitely what was happening with Hogan. So Mobster,
Yeah,
final
listen, it's
thoughts and stuff.
incredibly tough wrestling career. I don't care who you're talking about. If you've been in the game that long, it's very, very hard on the body. And there might be an argument to be made here, Steve, of realizing just how physically fucked you are because of your choices and how emotionally fucked you are, perhaps because of things you've made the mistakes on. And as Steve said, we're all going to die. We're all human. We all have frailties. We've all made fucking mistakes. So it might be nice for some shows to be very negative and completely disrespect the guy. Listen, we're going to say that he's done stupid shit. He's done great things as well. And he was for a very, very long time something of an iconic cartoon-like hero for people. And we shouldn't necessarily forget both sides of that particular aspect. Let us all know, as always, guys, are we completely and utter retards when it comes to this? Did we fuck up? Do we not read it right? Are we going to have to do a Joey Swole, Stephen, apologise for this show? I don't think so. I think we've been kind of fair and tried to be biased and unbiased in the right ways, back and forth in terms of the positives and the negatives, and understanding some aspects of the sport. Let us know if we're wrong. Let us know if we're right. Come onto the forum. Give us a kick in if we need it, verbal or otherwise. Please note, as always, we are not doctors and your opinions are ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.